We've been talking about craving and desire, and the last chapter was concerned how that manifests in relationships, human relationships. And now we've got a story which illustrates this. Vasishta continued, "O Ram, in this connection there's an ancient legend which I shall narrate to you. In the continent known as Jambudvipa, there is a great mountain known as Mahindra. In the forests on the slopes of that mountain many holy men and sages lived. They had in fact brought down onto that mountain the river Vyomaganga or Akashganga for their bath, drinking, etc. On the bank of this river there lived a holy man named Dirkatapa, who was, as his name implies, the very embodiment of ceaseless austerity. This ascetic had two sons, named Punya and Pavana. Of these, Punya had reached full enlightenment, but Pavana, though he had overcome ignorance, had not yet reached full enlightenment, and hence he had semi-wisdom." So that's an interesting distinction. You can overcome ignorance but not yet be fully enlightened, which seems to be the state of Rama in the scripture. He'd reached a state of dispassion and wisdom, but not actually achieved enlightenment. With the inexorable passage of invisible and intangible time, the sage Dirkatapa, who had freed himself from every form of attachment and craving, had grown in age and, even as a bird flies away from its cage, abandoned the body and reached the state of utter purity. Using the yogic method she had learnt from him, his wife too followed him. So here we're firmly established in the romance of yoga, that you can actually reach this state of utter purity through yoga. And I had a few things to say about this in the previous chapter, which I might refer to as we go along here. At this sudden departure of the parents, Pavana was sunk in grief, and he wailed aloud inconsolably. Punya, on the other hand, performed the funeral ceremonies but remained unmoved by the bereavement. He approached his grieving brother Pavana. We get two quite contradictory teachings here. We're about to hear about how it's foolish to be caught up in relationship or notions of relationship, and yet at other times it seems quite natural. Recently we heard about the great sage, the great rishi Brghu, who after 100 years or so of after 100 celestial years of meditation, came out of his meditation and saw the withered corpse of his son Sukra, and he was furious, he was angry at what had happened and wanted to curse time. Such was his bond to his son Sukra. And now we're going to hear how such an attitude is nonsense, and this is the yogic perspective, which tends to cut itself off somewhat, from ordinary human feelings, which I think is quite suspect, really. Punya said, "Brother, why do you bring this dreadful sorrow upon yourself? The blindness of ignorance alone is the cause of this torrential downpour of tears from your eyes. Our father has departed from here, along with our mother, to that state of liberation, or the highest state, which is natural to all beings, and is the very being of those who have overcome the self. Why do you grieve when they have returned to their own nature? You have ignorantly bound yourself to the notions of father and mother, and yet you grieve for those who are liberated from such ignorance. He was not your father, nor was she your mother, nor were you their son. You have had countless fathers and mothers. They have had countless children. Countless have been your incarnations, and if you wish to grieve over the death of parents, why do you not grieve for all those countless beings unceasingly? Noble one, what you see as the world is only an illusory appearance. In truth there are neither friends nor relatives. Hence there is neither death nor separation. All these wonderful signs of prosperity that you see around you are tricks, some of which last for 3 days and others for 5 days. With your keen intelligence inquire into the truth. Abandon notions of I, you, etc., and of he is dead, he is gone. All these are your own notions, not truth. Well, we can't really argue with that. I suppose the 3 or 5 days which are being mentioned here are the days that it takes to get over the worst part of grief. Punya's advice to his brother is based on the argument that we've had lots of previous lives. But even if you don't buy into that, and especially in the case of Pavana, whose parents were these great yogis and who consciously moved on from this life, it does seem rather strange that he is grieving. And one of the reasons that I think relationships like this are being focused on is because they do represent a very strong part of our own conditioning. And I don't think it's that you're supposed to become cold to these relationships. You just need to get them into perspective. Death is such a common thing, yet we can't help but grieve. So I think we should be careful when we come across this teaching not to dismiss grief, not to feel that there's something wrong with grieving. It needs to be given its proper course, and then we need to adjust to an appropriate perspective.